Everybody has heard of Margaret Thatcher, the most influential woman in modern day politics. She is dead. She has been dead. She stopped ruling, I think, in 1990. But we are still feeling the impact of her policies today. And I think this is a very important topic, and everybody needs to be aware and educated on Margaret Thatcher and how she impacted our economy and in fact the economy of the world. Hi guys, so today is a very different but important video. I'm going to be recommending about 3 documentaries in one that all link back to Margaret Thatcher. I think it's very important that we know the impact Margaret Thatcher has had on our society, whether it be the housing crisis, whether it be water bills, whether it be capitalism. She is the most influential woman, arguably, in modern day politics. So many things that go on around the world are because of her, and let's talk about it. So this is the first documentary. It's called Lords of Water: How Banks Are Profiting Off of the Water Crisis. Make sure you go and watch it on Daily Motion. Very, very amazing documentary. It talks about the privatization of water and how Thatcher brought about the idea that water should be private. The UK was the first country to have a privatized water system. Before that, water was run by the government. When Thatcher came in, she said, you know what? No, we're going to privatize water. Now, the problem with this caused many problems. First of all, she was saying, if you do not pay for your water, if you're too poor, they cut off your water. Another thing that is very problematic and how it impacts us till this day is an Australian company chose to take over the water system in London. So basically, if you're living in London, how you get your tap water, how you flush your toilet, how you have access to water in London. So an Australian company came, took over the water in London. This was all, of course, for monetary gain. Now, what the Australian company did is they decided they are going to borrow lots and lots and lots and lots of money. They claimed that this money will be for maintenance of our water supply, basically maintaining pipes and keeping water clean and so on and so forth. But this Australian company lied. They lied. What they decided to do is all this money they were borrowing, they were claiming is for maintenance, they were putting in their pockets. So what they did is they made sure that they were in so much debt. They took on so much debt, and when they saw that the debt was too much, they ran off and went back to Australia. Now, you have to remember, everybody needs water. They knew they could run the company into so much debt, and they could easily resell the company because water is a necessity. So then when the new company took over our water, they had to then pay back this debt. Obviously, that company is not paying that debt back themselves. It's us, the consumers. Our water bills are so high because we are paying back debts, which were a result of Thatcher's policy to privatize water. It is very, very stupid. Very stupid, because obviously companies know that water, you need it. So I can do whatever I want. Even today, you've got so many companies that just dump raw sewage into the beaches, in everywhere. You're swimming in raw sewage. Companies do this because they can. Water has been privatized and companies don't give a toss, and they know that you're going to continue paying for water because you need it. Next one also links to water. Very, very insightful. This is Nestle, Darkest Secret, The Disturbing Truth by Magnates Media. Nestle thought it was okay to go to California and start pumping out a lot of their water. And remember, California has a lot of droughts, so they are desperate for water. Nestle decided to pump millions and millions and millions of gallons of water and sell it back to Californians at extortionate prices. Now, of course, Thatcher influenced this because Thatcher is the one that made the precedent that water should be privatized. Nestle even go to Pakistan and pump their wells dry out of water and sell their water back to them. When you look at Australia, and the first documentary I didn't add, but when you look at Australia, where there is drought, when there is a dry season, the prices of water rise. All of this links back to Margaret Thatcher. Next documentary. This is a documentary I already did a couple days ago, so you can go and watch the full video on that. These are very brief summaries. Margaret Thatcher, she introduced right to buy, which looks very good. It allowed basically the working class to buy their council homes and they then can own property. The problem with this is when the working class people bought their council homes, these council homes were not replaced. On top of that, the money they used to buy their council homes was never reinvested in building new council homes. However, it was put elsewhere. So that is why there is a lot of scarcity when it comes to council homes, because Margaret Thatcher said you can buy your council home, but once you buy it, we are not replacing it. And I spoke about the other day, is it selfishness? The system forces people to be selfish because by buying a home, you are also putting other people at a disadvantage. I say it is not the fault of the buyer, but the system forces the buyer to be selfish because anything that Margaret Thatcher does not favour the working class. Very important. And you can see Margaret Thatcher has been dead for how many years? I never understood why when people celebrated when she died. She's been dead for how many years? But a lot of the political actions she did have impacted us today. Even when you look at the financial crisis, Margaret Thatcher decided we're going to deregulate the markets. We are not going to monitor how banks hand out loans. Before, there was a lot of scrutiny. Before Thatcher decided to bring about what they call the Big Bang, there was a lot of scrutiny on how banks hand out money. However, after Thatcher decided to deregulate these banks, banks could then hand out loans how they decide to. So in 2008, what actually triggered the financial crisis, or one of the things that triggered the financial crisis, was the Royal Bank of Scotland relied heavily on what they call subprime loans. This was very specific to America. Subprime mortgage loans, may I add. What they are is basically giving mortgage loans to those who can obviously not afford to pay back these loans, or those who are risky borrowers. So banks can then give these subprime mortgage loans with very, very high interest rates because these are poorer people who you think will never pay back the loan or will never finish to pay off that loan. The reason why these loans were very attractive, they make a lot of money because the interest rates are high. And at that time, houses were very, very valuable. So they said, even if these poor people cannot pay off their loans, which they probably couldn't, we're going to sell their houses and we get more money off of that. However, the financial crisis happened because houses were at one point no longer worth anything because nobody could afford to pay their mortgage. These mortgages were given to poor people. These subprime mortgage loans were given to poor people. A lot of poor people had houses. They couldn't pay back their loans. And banks lost a lot of money because they were not able to get money back from these subprime mortgage loans. And they were not able to sell off the property because properties at this point were worth nothing. So either way, the banks lost money because of this. So it's very important to know, as much as Margaret Thatcher is dead, and as much as we don't remember her reign, we can still see the impact of her policies today.